Okay, so we've arrived here at a garden called Gethsemane. Gethsemane is just an olive press. And so when people say, hey, are we going to go to the Garden of Gethsemane? That's a really hard question to answer, because there is no one we can say it. We know 100% it was this one here, because it was called the Mount of Olives because of all the olive trees. And so along the whole base of the slope, there was just groves and groves of olive trees. So what we try to do is figure out, okay, where did he have that final supper, that last Passover meal? Where was the house of Caiaphas, the high priest? Where was Herod stationed? Because we know he comes down and he's arrested and he's taken up. So based on that, we can kind of pick a general slope of the mount. And so it's in this region here, because all that stuff takes in place behind us. Because the Temple Mount is here, Pilate is here, Herod is here. He doesn't live here, he lives in Caesarea, but it's the high holidays, it's Passover, he has to come, he's a dignitary. So when it talks about that he was sent to Pilate, and then he was sent to Herod, then he sent back to Pilate, then he went to the house of Caiaphas, then he went to the upper room, then he went to the garden, you're like, how far did he go? Not far.
Wow.
It's just a few blocks. And when you're here, when you actually get to see that physically the geographical background, it starts to make a little more sense. I can preach a very long sermon, but I'm not going to. I got thumbs up. See, you're here live. They can hit pause on YouTube. You can't. So for those of us who are here on location, what I want to do is talk about what happened when he came here. Just before he came, he was in the upper room here on Mount Zion. And for those of us who come from just a traditional Christian background, we know about Good Friday, right? We know about Easter, we know about the Last Supper, that we call the Last Supper. And if you only see it as a Last Supper, it kind of seems like, I don't want to call it a going away party, but a going away dinner. Hey, we've been together for 3.5 years. He knows what's going to happen to himself, and so he wants to have one more meal with his disciples and then release them. That's not actually what's going on. More than once he says, we need to go to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. And once you know what the Passover is, and you understand that it's a special meal that takes place every year on the 14th day of the Hebrew month called Nisan. And during this meal, there's always a leader. And because he's their rabbi, Jesus is the leader of this meal. And over the centuries, kind of this ceremony has evolved. A certain amount of cups you have to drink, and there's kinds of food you have to eat. There's a type of bread you have to eat. And because Jesus is the leader of the Seder, he's the one who's doing all the talking, right? He's breaking the bread, he's asking, he's doing all of the work. But I can tell you what he was doing, because for hundreds, if not a couple of thousand years before him, his ancestors were doing the same thing, and since then they've been doing the same thing. So every year as we celebrate or commemorate Passover, we know we're actually doing the same thing that he was doing. If you remember, it says that after the supper, he took the cup. After the supper. That's actually a hint. And we miss it. As Christians, we thought, okay, they had dinner and he was thirsty, he had a glass of wine. No. There's actually 4 cups that you drink throughout the whole meal. And the first one is called the cup of thanks. That's how you start the meal. You give thanks to God for bringing you for another season of Passover. Then the second cup is called the cup of instruction. And that's when you tell the story of the Passover, of the plagues, of the Exodus and God's provision. And it's a long part of the meal, but you tell the whole story so it never gets forgotten. And then you have your meal. And then right after the meal, you have a third cup, and that's called the cup of redemption. That's the cup God says, I will redeem you and bring you out of the land. So interesting that after the supper, he takes the third cup, which is called the cup of redemption. And he says, this cup no longer means what you think it means. Now it means your redemption because of what's about to happen. He's very, very intentional about talking about what's going to happen at that third cup. And then he progresses to the fourth cup, which is called the cup of acceptance. And he says something interesting. He says, I will not drink of this cup. Why didn't he drink the cup? Because he wasn't going to be accepted. He knew that he had come. The chief stone was coming to be rejected. He wouldn't drink that cup, but he gets to the garden and he makes a statement. He says, Father, if this cup can pass from me. Why does he say that? He has to go through with it in order for God to accept the sacrifice, in order for the sins to be atoned. And so we always think of his sacrifice starting on the cross. But I think it started here in the garden when he chose to say yes. And on top of that, in a marriage covenant, when you offer up a glass of wine to the bride, to the woman you're interested in, when you offer her up a glass of wine, that's the proposal. And he offers up the glass to the disciples in that upper room. But then after the bride drinks the cup, the groom who makes the offer has to drink the cup himself. And so when he said, I will not drink of this cup, it's like he didn't finish the contract until he got here to Gethsemane. And he says, if this cup can pass from me, but no, I will drink of the cup, because he knows in order for the marriage to be solidified, in order for the covenant to become legal, he has to drink the cup. And he does that here for you. He does that here for me. You know, and I'm glad that there's people right now watching this on YouTube, but I'm so glad that you guys are here on location, getting to experience, and just, he knows all that's going to happen. And maybe there's a plan B that can be negotiated, but he says, no, no, no. I have to drink the cup. I have to become the sacrifice so that my Father can accept my atoning death. And I have to drink the cup because I want this marriage to work. I want them to be my bride, and he's willing to pay the price for his bride, and the greatest price he could ever pay was his life for us. Amen.